Hi ladies, I'm hoping you can see me. It's really difficult because I had to set it up myself and I've got no one behind the camera telling me what we can see. So if you can't see me, just enjoy the story all the same. Now read to you, Mattie. If you remember rightly, she had actually got herself in the coal scuttle because she got scared. So here we go. The woman realised that Mattie did not like being in the house, so she carefully picked her up and took her outside again. The hedgehog then settled down happily to eat her supper, none the worse for her ordeal. The woman never took her in the house again, but sometimes, when the kitchen door was left open, Mattie would quietly creep in of her own accord and lap up a saucer of milk which the woman had put down for her. Both Mattie and Quill had forgotten the previous summer, but as they ranged around the garden, familiar scents reminded them where to find the good food. They had also forgotten their mother and the old boar, and they ran together content with each other's company and happy to be alive in a new adult world. Under the trees in the waste, clumps of wild anemones blew in the wind. The damp earth around their roots was full of small creatures, and the two hedgehogs often hunted there, since they had already eaten most of the pests which had remained alive in the gardens after the hard winter. On a balmy April evening, Mattie wriggled through the tangles of leaves and grass and came face to face with a strange boar which was hunting alone. The strange hedgehog touched Mattie's snout with his and would have run off with her, but Quill rushed furiously at him, bowling the stranger over again and again and trying to sink his teeth into his throat. The other boar was no match for Quill, who had come through the hard winter in a far better condition than his opponent, who had not had the benefit of a warm winter quarters and regular meals of bread and milk. The strange hedgehog was soon routed, leaving nothing but a few tufts of his woolly undercoat on the ground. From then on, Quill always went in front of Mattie. She followed meekly wherever he led, and it was he who chose their hunting grounds and decided where they should go for their bread and milk. Mattie's first litter was born in May and consisted of 4 in all, 2 males, 2 females. About a week before they were born, a stray cat sniffing around the flower pot had frightened Mattie, and the next day the woman from the house looked in the pot to see if the urchins were safe, and was surprised to find that they had gone. Both Mattie and Quill still come regularly for their evening meal of bread and milk, but it seemed to the woman that they had left her garden and gone to live somewhere else. There did not appear to be anywhere in the garden where they could have hidden, and she could not find where they slept during the day, although she looked in all the likely places. Then, for a few evenings, Quill came alone for bread and milk, and the woman began to fear that Mattie was dead. Then came an evening when the man from the house looked through the window of his study, saw Mattie crawling out of a hole beneath the compost heap. It was still quite light, and he watched her running up and down the garden for quite a while, until eventually she vanished into a tangled mass behind the raspberry canes. I lost my drift then. After that, Quill still came alone for his bread and milk, but Mattie was seen at about 7 o'clock each evening, scrambling out of her hiding place in the compost heap before taking her exercise in the garden. She was very nervous and curled up when the woman tried to touch her, but late at night a soft grunting could be heard near the house. Towards the end of June, the woman from the bread and milk house went to see one of her neighbours and found a young hedgehog there, laying unconscious in the stump of a drain. The side of this sump had been built up to a height of over a foot, so that the water from the downpipe would not splash out onto the path, and the little urchin had obviously fallen into it during the night and had been unable to climb out. During the day, 2 bathfuls of hot water had gushed down onto him, battering against the sides of the sump, and half drowned by the water, he had lain unconscious on the grit for the whole of the afternoon. Blowflies had already settled on his unprotected eyes and on his ears. When the woman picked him up, water drained from his nose and mouth, but but a faint twitching of his limp body told her that he still had life in him. His bristles were grey, darkening to brown, his snout and paws were black, and his stomach was covered with a grey wool. The woman knew that he was about 6 weeks old. She carried the little hedgehog by the back legs to let the water drain from his lungs as she took him to the house. When she took him into the house, she dried him as best she could with an old piece of rag, and he rewarded her by pricking her hand as he curled up in terror. After the woman had dried him, she put him deep in the hay of the flower pot and left some milk outside for him. The next morning he was still in the flower pot, laying half curled up in the hay, with his front paws pressed against his body and his hind feet and tail turned up over them. He was breathing strongly and evenly, but he was still rather damp, and his whole body felt cold. His eyes were tightly closed under his wrinkled brows, and he had not touched the milk. The woman was determined not to let the young urchin starve to death, so she bought a doll's feeding bottle with a little plastic teat to feed him with. The weather was cold and damp, so she took him out of the flower pot and put him in a box with a hot water bottle and plenty of hay. She placed the box near the kitchen stove, and the little hedgehog soon dried out. That evening the woman forced the teat of the feeding bottle between his clenched teeth and managed to squeeze a small quantity of milk and glucose into his mouth. The urchin lay on his back in her hand and swallowed the milk reluctantly. The next morning he seemed much stronger. He bit ferociously on the teat as the woman fed him and watched her every movement with his beady black eyes. He soon recognised the smell of the woman's hands, and he would crawl towards her when she bent to pick him up. He appeared to be quite strong and healthy, but on the 4th day, when the woman picked him up to feed him, she found that his eyes and ears were crawling mass of maggots. The little hedgehog curled up as soon as the woman tried to brush them away. After a lot of difficulty, she managed to sponge most of the maggots away, but there were still a few left under his lower eyelids, and these could not be dislodged. He let the woman unfold his wrinkled ears and clean them out, and she was able to pick the loose maggots from his fur, but he would not open his eyes, so the woman was unable to tell if they were damaged by the maggots. He still took his food eagerly, opening the pink cavern of his mouth and chewing vigorously on the teat as he swallowed the milk and glucose. The woman decided to let him out for a little walk in the garden, where he started to pick up insects from the moss on the path. He was very unsteady on his feet and kept falling over. Apart from that, he seemed quite lively and healthy. When he was put back in his box, he burrowed deep into the hay, hiding himself from the light. Right, I'm going to sort my dog out, and I will be back to read some more.